Okay, I think I have chapter 46 to the point where it is serviceable. It's not perfect. It's not probably it's still rough, but it's a lot better than it was when I started. I'm running out of old material to put down and then try to fix. I'm running out of the old writing that I didn't lose. And in some respects, I think the old stuff is kind of cumbersome because it needs to be fleshed out. It needs to be rewritten. It's I don't know. I think almost writing from scratch is easier. So chapter 46 has a new scene, and it has a restored old scene that I fixed up. I just wanted to clarify with my video I made the other day about wanting reader input. I was just trying to get an idea of how predictable I am as a writer. It's like, do you guys already know what's going to happen? And so if that was a strange thing to ask people, it's just me just trying to fish, trying to get some idea of what people think. And anyway, I kind of already know what's going to happen, but it's just good to know what other people think. And predictability is a bad thing. I don't like books when I pick them up and I'm halfway through the first chapter and I know exactly what's going to happen. Oh, this is, you know. I don't like endings that are predictable either. So anyway, without further ado, chapter 46. Sorry, I did want to apologize before I read this for the especially loud cricket noises. We just brought a fresh batch of crickets, and they're especially loud. So yes, you're in the bowels of a extinct volcano in the wintertime. And now we have mouse noises. We can do something about the mouse noises. We can't do anything about the crickets. So you're going to have to pretend really hard that those crickets, that's actually the sound, the distant sound of water. Yeah. Song of Mornius, chapter 46. Following close on Galen's heels, Avalar slowed at the sound of trickling water. Up ahead, Tarek was pausing before a rough-hewn series of steps formed in the stone, steps leading upward into a darkened hollow in the ceiling. Florina huddled beside him, visibly trembling. "My pool." Her whisper reached Avalar. "We're on the 5th level. I've used these stairs." "Why isn't it lit?" she asked softly, drifting to an indentation in the wall where Avalar guessed a light source should be. "Shh!" Tarek motioned Argus ahead to light the steps. As Avalar watched expectantly, Tarek raised his foot to follow the ghost. Behind her, Daravan Silva screamed. She whirled, snatching out her sword. Galen jumped to her side, and his staff flared bright, illuminating the guard lying prone on his back, pressed hard against the floor by an immense thing of blackness, a glistening shape like a wolf or bear. Before anyone could move, the creature dug in with its claws and pulled the guard apart, blood splattering the walls on either side. Writhing in pain, Silva screamed as the toothy head lowered, slavering jaws wide in a thunderous roar. Then the head dipped, the wedge-shaped muzzle burying itself deep into the hollow below the guard's ribs. There came a soft, ripping sound as it tore free a mouthful of entrails, flinging it to the ceiling. "Daravan!" It was Tarek's voice, shouting from behind her. Tarek thrusting himself past Dren Avram and Florina. Then fire erupted beside her head. Galen howled with rage, his chin to his chest, his one hand thrusting her back behind him, his other holding Mornius like a spear. Before her eyes, she saw his light weave itself into a shape, a fire beast with angry claws spread, rushing headlong at the thing destroying Silva. There was a flash. Angry ribbons of flame sluiced sideways down the empty rock, flickering as they sputtered out. The darkness had fled. Only the guard remained, his rib cage torn apart, his head thrown back, bits of him hanging, dripping blood from the rocky ceiling. With her keen ears, Avalar heard the almost inaudible cries in Tarek's throat. There was a long pause and the rasp of heavy breathing. "Tarek?" Lieutenant Roth asked softly. "Are you—" "Vurgen," Tarek said in a strangled voice. "Check him, please. Make sure." Numb, Avalar turned to Galen as the grim-faced Vurgen pushed by. The staff-wielder leaned against the wall, his whole body trembling, his wide brown eyes glistening. "You tried," Avalar said gently. "Galen?" "Dead," Vurgen said hoarsely, straightening up, his finger still resting on Silva's throat. "Tarek, I am so—" "Forget it," Tarek rasped. "We can't—" "Gindel!" Roth stumbled where he stood. Avalar saw how his frantic eyes focused past her at the darkness beyond the stricken guard. Then he whirled toward Tarek, gesturing frantically. "My sister!" Roth cried. "He's got her! Tarek!" "No, he doesn't," Tarek snapped. "Roth, stop it!" "Tarek!" Snatching out his sword, Roth started to bolt. At once, Avalar seized the younger man, lifted him flailing and kicking into the air. "Where the sword?" she cried, as his flashing blade's tip flicked close to her cheek. "Tarek Florn," Galen said in Holrum's calm, unflustered voice. "I have no answer to this. Malian fights with methods unknown to me." "Understood!" Tarek snarled the word. Avalar gaped at the raw, seething fury on his face as he stopped short beside her. In her grasp, Roth twisted to see him, his frantic young face flaming red, hands bunching at his sides. "Gindel!" Again Roth pointed wildly. "Tarek, help her!" "She's dead, Roth," Tarek said, and Avalar could hear the shredded pain behind his rage. "You found her dead yourself, remember? Think about it. I can't lose you too." Eyes closed, Roth gritted his teeth, and then Avalar felt him relaxing in her grasp. Surrender. At Tarek's nod, she gently set him down. Again the young man stumbled, and without thinking, Tarek steadied him with a hand. Avalar followed her leader's gaze. He was looking toward Vurgen, still seated beside Silva. The captain had spread a blanket over the body. It was the nearest thing they had to a burial. "He's been with me all these years," said Tarek, moving to stare down at the still form. In Mornius's steady light, Avalar saw the dampness under his eyes. "My father assigned him to me on my 10th birthday." "Tarek Florn?" It was Holrum's voice, and Avalar cringed at the sound. Another tactless remark, she thought grimly, spoken at the wrong time. "Malian has not left," Holrum said. "We must leave from this place." Tarek glanced toward the speaker, toward Galen standing with his staff beside her, to the confused expression he wore whenever Holrum took him over. "You won't heal him?" Tarek asked. Slowly Galen shook his head, and Avalar was reminded of a puppet she had seen once, manipulated by a string. Yet when next Holrum spoke, the voice was sad. "I cannot heal what has been so cruelly torn to pieces, Tarek Florn. There are ways to remake him, but I fear your Galen is already grievously ill, and he has much to do yet." "Remake him?" Tarek moved to kneel beside Silva. Gently he touched the upturned palm outside the blanket. Then, taking the edge of the fabric between his gloved fingers, he covered the hand. "I can't imagine he'd like that much." "There are worse things than death," Vurgen said quietly from opposite Silva. "Believe me." Avalar stepped sideways as Filrina quietly drifted between her and the unyielding wall. The woman was staring at Roth, who had returned his focus again to the darkness of the tunnel from where they had come. "Don't." Urgently, Florina whispered to the younger man. He started at the sound of her voice, and then, hands trembling, turned toward her. She looked into his face, his look of aching and sorrow. "Whatever you hear," Florina told him softly, "isn't real. It's a trick," she said, and Avalar saw that the woman was silently weeping. "He's trying to lure you away so he can kill you too. Your hurt is feeding him. He feeds off pain." Slowly, Roth nodded. "I'm sorry for what I—" "No." Florina shook her head and managed a smile. "I'm the one who's sorry for my part." Avalar, looking past them, saw Tarek climb stiffly to his feet, his face rigid, eyes determined as he glared angrily toward the steps. "Yes," Halram acknowledged, "we must continue forward. We must not let Malian cripple us." At that, Tarek nodded. "We're not crippled," he said. Deliberately, he flicked a defiant glare at them all. "Deravan, that's the last thing he would want." Catching his look, Avalar jerked up her sword. "Nor will we become crippled," Tarek added fiercely. "That's the spirit," Argus growled above their heads. "Attaboy!" Galen shuffled toward the steps with his face turned upward. He glanced at Florina as he passed, and Avalar saw him nod. "Your knowledge, Florina Flynn," Halram said, "coupled with my fire and Avalar's memory. Come." He nodded to the shadows above the stair. "Let us wring some light from all this darkness, something good from all this bad." Avalar nodded as Virgin, his face still wet with tears, passed by. She watched the captain clasp Dren Avram by his shoulder, watched him turn the younger guard from the friend they were forced to leave behind. Pony leaned on his knees, the wild wind whipping his white hair before his face. He knelt on a ledge overlooking Mount Chestnut. In his sweaty grasp, his staff trembled. He gripped it with both hands, delved with his senses through its shifting layers. He had cleared from the temple all the humans he could find, whose minds were clouded and benumbed by Malian. Now ahead lay the task of utterly destroying the rest, the ones who leapt to do their god's bidding for the sadistic joy it gave them, coupled with insatiable want for power. In humans he found good qualities and bad. There was a desire to do good, but also a capacity for harm or a lusting for power. On Talankai the goodness would be welcome, the rest would not. Humans would not be allowed to inflict the kind of wrongs he had witnessed on the earth. Talankai, the world he loved, could not bear it, and nor would he. He had lost one world, he would not lose another. Through Sephram's touch he sensed Malian's awareness shifting within the mountain, sensed the dark warder bearing fangs of power, moving toward his foe. Pony clenched his teeth. "This killing must end," he thought fiercely. "These humans must be stopped." He focused on the present, sweeping aside any hope of warmth or daylight, opening his mind instead to darkness, despair, and pain, of starving men and women left alone in their cell. In his hands the crystal went black. Eyes narrowed, he thrust through its layers, struggling to find shapes in the darkness, the warmth of living flesh. Trembling he stood. Dread clogged his movements, stiffened all his muscles. He would be blind for this transfer, stepping off the world into the jaws of nothingness, perhaps death. His only reference was blackness and the ache in his bones of hunger. His delving left a human taste in his mouth. He caught the scent of fear, the eye-watering stench of stale urine. Jaws clenched, he closed his eyes and imagined himself there, where people were starving. There, in a place so cold, dark, and damp, buried alive and ribs heaving beneath unyielding, indifferent stone. Blind, cold, hungry, terrified, he was Voices then, people beside his head, gasping. His heart lurched, skipping beats. The air was sour, reeking of feces, disease and death, yet still he breathed it, snatching it in. Leaning against his staff, he struggled to stay erect. Eyes open, he found himself staring at his staff's white light, at his own magic upholding him. An angel, someone whispered. Look, we're saved! At that, Pony glowered, blinking into the absolute darkness beyond his staff. Not this again, he muttered, glaring at the vague, shifting silhouettes of people close by. See the ears? With his free hand, he lifted his hair. I'm an elf, not an angel. An elf! He rested for a moment, listening intently past the whisperings of the humans to a distant throbbing in the stone. Then tentative footsteps padding around him, rough peasant fabric rustling as bodies moved beyond his light. Is this a kindness? He asked. I can't see you, but you can see me. Am I Malian's servant? No, I've come to help you, not harm. Please, a voice groaned near his light. Help me. Pony glanced toward the speaker. I risk much coming here to get you out, he said. I am Pony, adopted son of the Connell elves from the north. Show yourself. Footsteps shuffled. From the darkness, a young man appeared, his bruised and bloody arms hiding his face. Pony stared at the priest's torn robes, the tatters of flesh draped over his cheeks from what had once been ears. You are a priest. Incredulous, Pony lowered his staff, dimmed its light so the young man could see. Malian's servant, why are you here? The priest sank to his knees and let his arms drop. Betrayal, he whispered. I'm Gulgren, he added, as if that would explain it all. Blood welled from his lacerated lower lip. His hands hung at his sides, the fingers cruelly twisted. I was apprenticed to a betrayer who I let escape. I didn't tie her. I didn't think. His shoulders shaking with soundless grief, the young man turned and stumbled, rudderless, toward the black outline of the nearest wall. Another human entered his light, and then another. Pony stared at their dull, sunken eyes, their gaunt, fleshless faces. All were gravely ill, bones showing through in places. Like living skeletons they gathered near, 100, possibly more. Overwhelmed by so much misery, Pony lost his ability to count or even think. As his sight adjusted, he could see people lying curled on the floor, barely moving at all. Beyond them, he saw another vague outline, a pile of corpses heaped at the very back of the large cell. No offense, but why haven't they sacrificed you? Pony asked softly. What do you call this? A man snapped, stepping forward. He shook his head, visibly fighting for self-control. We are sacrificed, he said finally. This is just the slowest method they've come up with. They've tried many. They feed us poison mash or nothing at all. For a long moment, Pony stared at the man's grim face. Then he lowered his head, blinking hard. He still comes here, the man continued, assuming his different shapes. He hovers over us, dissolves some of us. Every day he gets stronger. Our suffering feeds him. My wife was dissolved, the man added softly. I watched him wrap himself around her, and it took... He swallowed. Days. He turned away, body shaking. I still hear her screams. I promise you, Pony growled behind his back. He will pay for his crimes. This warder is going to die, one way or the other. He is, among even his own kind, an abomination. Inhaling deeply to rein in his outrage, Pony rubbed his eyes with his fist and fought to see. A group of 4 men were lying huddled together between the dying and the dead, their arms and legs entwined protectively. Just like Gulgren, they were clad in gray robes. "Listen," he spoke as loudly as he dared. "Bring everyone here. Those people on the floor. I want everyone as close to me as possible. I'm taking you out of here." The man Pony was starting to think of as their leader shook his head. "But those men are sick," he said. "They've fouled themselves. They're likely diseased. They're needing our help and healing, obviously." Pony cut him off. "I don't care. Bring them. In case you didn't know it, you humans are becoming an endangered species on this world. For your future survival, you'll need everyone you can get." He turned to Gulgren. The young priest had crept off to huddle down in his robes as far from the others as he could. In growing dismay, Pony watched the other prisoners, the starved humans moving weakly to comply, to drag the sick or dying his way. Then he froze, his gaze locking on the huddle of gray robes as 2 large prisoners dealt them several hard kicks. "Stop that!" Pony snarled. Furling his wings, he hurried quickly to stand protectively over the priests. Now, looking down, he could see their condition, beaten almost to the point of death. He moved close, placed one hand on a trembling shoulder, though the man was unconscious, and glared at his 2 tormentors. "Leave these men alone," he commanded, "or none of you go anywhere." "You can't be serious," snapped a voice. Pony turned to the grieving man who had lost his wife. "Actually, I can," returned Pony fiercely, "and I was." Deliberately he went to the wall where Gulgren crouched. The young man whimpered at his approach, cowering down. "No more fear," Pony told him gently. "You're coming too." "What do you mean he's coming?" shrieked a tiny woman, bristling at his words. "His kind's put us in here." "And my kind's getting you out," Pony returned. "So I get to make the rules, and I say he comes too." He snapped his fingers toward the battered priests. "Bring them! Bring him! I want everyone still breathing." "No!" cried the woman. Then all the humans were talking at once, gesturing angrily. A mob of glowering faces and clenched fists, they advanced toward him. Pony stepped back and caught Gulgren's arm. Tugging gently but firmly, he brought the trembling young man directly under his staff's bright glare. Then he caught at Gulgren's cowl, pulled it down from his battered head. "See this? Look at him!" Pony snarled the words. He paused, gripping the young man hard to keep him from bolting. The priest flinched where he stood, his nose askew, his left cheekbone and eye socket shattered. Across his forehead his skin gaped open, the torn flesh glistening from infection, crusted with old blood. One eye was swollen shut, a trail of yellow leaking from under his lids down his cheek. "You people did this!" Pony raged. He was livid at the young man's condition, trembling with fury. "Not the monsters holding you here, not the monster they worship, you. So tell me how you are any better. Where's the compassion? When have you shown any in this place? First you beat these unarmed men, then you talk about leaving the sickest of you behind?" His rage escalated as he spoke. Then he exploded. "Now bring them!" The prisoners shrank back. The strongest of them shuffled slowly over to the huddle of priests. Tight-lipped, trembling with fury, Pony watched them bend to untangle the bruised arms and legs, half carry and half pull the men gently across the rough stone into his light. Calloused fingers touched his arm, touched his hand that held Gulgren steady. Pony looked up, caught a glimpse of great brown eyes and swarthy skin beneath black matted hair. The brown man's fingers trembled against his own. "I dreamt about you," the man whispered. "Your wings." Pony smiled at him and nodded. Some humans have magic, he said gently. He frowned then at the body stretched around his feet, at the throng of nervous, fearful humans standing near. Then he released Gulgrin's arm and raised his head, opening himself to the many weak pulses in the air, the prisoner's labored breathing. The group was silent now, staring with expressions of hope, mistrust, fear. Don't be frightened, he told them softly. You'll be moving while standing still. Understand? You must stand very still for me now. He nodded, turning to see all their faces. Good. Now, touch each other, Pony instructed. Huddle up close and press against me. Look to my staff. Think of nothing but my staff. The colors you see, the play of light in the crystal. Try to imagine yourself inside it. What would it look like from inside? He paused, frowning at their incomprehension. Look, when the magic comes, just look at the pretty colors. That's all there is to it. Don't look away and don't be afraid. Pony stood in their midst, his left arm encircling Gulgrin's lower back. His staff flared as he raised it, flickering quickly as if sensing his need. He thought of the Seeker elves in Meredith, with their steadfast commitment to healing. Only the Seekers, with their power, could help these people now, heal their spirits as well as their flesh. He saw the temple with its domed main chamber, the reflective crystal roof rising behind it. He saw his old friend, Teravmithan, and Mathedon, his brother. Closing his eyes, Pony placed himself beneath that roof, with all these people pressed around him, within those walls, with so many hearts beating close along with his. Power screamed as his staff ignited. Again he plunged through its layers, along currents hurtling them forward. All the while there were hearts flailing near, wild birds straining to be free, striking him with frantic wings. With a clench of will he held them tight, reinforced his power. Like leaves in a river they were swept along with him, buoyed up as he was by time's mindless flow. It was a river he knew, a magic he mastered. By the strength of pure focus he had once crossed the void to gain this world. Now he would snatch these people from their doom, land them at Meredith on the wide gildstone floor in the temple's main chamber, right below the table of 7. A chiming touched his ears, a sweet random music like tinkling bells. Pony collapsed, huddling under his wings as the humans released him. With slow, deep breaths he struggled to rebalance himself. Thank you, Gulgrin whispered, and Pony saw the young man kneeling by his head. Pony, did you call yourself? Are you okay? Pony planted his staff, braced himself on it, and dragged himself up. Standing tall, he smiled at Gulgrin. Yes, I am, thank you, he said, but you... Reaching out, Pony pulled hair from the young man's infected forehead. Are not. So you will follow me now. That eye needs care, and I want Teravmithan himself to attend you. He nodded toward the stooped figure of the ancient elf entering the room. Gulgrin raised his broken hands. Pony stiffened as the human touched his face. He stared at the young man before him, at Gulgrin's one good eye shining bright. Then he smiled.